Gilbert Cedillo, Chair of the Immigrant Affairs, Civil Rights, and Equity Committee. Today is October 3rd, 2019, and I want to welcome you, all of you. We are here today to discuss the city's ongoing commitment to the Los Angeles Justice Fund for legal representation of immigrants facing deportation proceedings. As always, we are committed to stand with immigrants and their families, recognizing the struggle of immigrants here in this darkest, but looking like the end of the Trump era. We've got a lot of work to do, and so today we'd like to move forward by engaging in discussion, taking action to address concerns that all of us have. We will begin with the presentation. We will hold public comment for after the presentation. So at this time, I'd like to invite representatives from the CAO's office to the table. And please give us your report.
Mr. Chair, can I read the item into the record?
Please.
Item number 1 is a CAO report relative to the status of the Los Angeles Justice Fund, November 27th, 2017 through March 31st, 2019, and Year 1 evaluation.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. Camilla Fong from the Office of the CAO. The item before you pertains to the status report covering the first through the fifth quarters of the Los Angeles Justice Fund activities from roughly November 27th, 2017 through March 31st, 2019, as well as the Vera Institute Year 1 Evaluation Report, assessment of overall LA Justice Fund performance. This status report provides information on the city's $2 million commitment to the fund, as well as additional details on the Los Angeles Justice Fund caseload, statistics, outcomes, successes, and challenges to program implementation, as well as recommendations for refining the LA Justice Fund program. For the city's commitment, expenditures to date are about $1.19 million. All funds have been allocated. The city caseload breakdown is about 188 cases total, with 169 pending. 19 have closed thus far. Of the 14 completed cases, 6 were successful outcomes, resulting in relief granted. 3 resulted in orders of removal, and 5 cases, the outcomes were incomplete. Also, at this time, I wanted to make note that we're in the process of executing a second amendment to the contract for extension of time to cover the performance year, and also we're in the process of dispersing the second million of our commitment.
Do you have any judgment, or I appreciate the metrics of the presentation. Do you have any comment, judgment? I know this is an unprecedented effort on behalf of the city. Any recommendations? Or would that be premature?
A little premature, although I think we'd like to work with our LA Justice Fund partners to discuss how to move forward in terms of the direction and how best we can help our constituents.
Okay. All right. We're joined by CCF and Vera. You guys want to join us at the table? please identify yourselves for the record and give us your comments and presentations with respect to the report of the CAO.
Sure. My name is Talia Inlander. I'm a supervising attorney at Public Counsel.
Efrain Escobedo, Vice President with California Community Foundation.
Hortensia Rodriguez, Program Associate at the Vera Institute of Justice.
Rosie Arroyo, Senior Program Officer for Immigration at the California Community Foundation.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee, for an opportunity to come share more about the LA Justice Fund's work and also our partnership with both the city, the county, and our colleagues at the Weingart Foundation, who together a couple of years ago came together to really address what was a serious and gross vulnerability that was impacting our immigrant communities here in LA County. And just want to today share that we've shared with you a few slides that are going to focus our comments to the committee regarding the LA Justice Fund. But I wanted to open up by just sharing that the work of the Justice Fund for California Community Foundation has been one of stretching ourselves in terms of our programmatic goals and what we're focused on at the time, to really be responsive to the needs of the community. And that is the fact that we had over 2/3 of our members in the community who were being put into deportation proceedings having literally no access to due process in that. And as we expected and have seen, immigrant detention and deportation increase significantly by as much as 42%, that we here in LA, while being very immigrant friendly, had no safety net in place to provide protections and due process, not just for these undocumented immigrants who were being put into detention and put into removal proceedings, but for their families, who many of whom have citizen children and have lived here for several decades. I share this only to say that up until the LA Justice Fund, California Community Foundation did not support or fund legal services. And what we realized after 2016 was that that was a major mistake and created serious vulnerabilities in our system, and sought out the leadership in the city and the county to create a safety net. And then in the past year, it's been a very challenging period to try and understand how we can support and build the safety net. And it's really been the strength and work of our partners, the service providers and other partners who have really moved us forward. So with that, would continue on to our slides to say that two of our key goals was to build a safety net to provide greater protections. That as we embarked on this work, we realized that this was really part of a national movement across the country, and understanding that large segments of our communities did not have access to due process in these removal proceedings, and that it was going to take a public and private investment to secure not only the courage and leadership to create a pilot that started to weave together a safety net, but that provided the opportunity for a sustaining of that safety net, not just during the pilot period, but in years beyond that. So with the Justice Fund, looking at this as a safety net infrastructure that through these resources has been able to be bolstered, the ideas and the work of our pilot sought to do a couple of things. And that was, one, to expand the capacity of removal defense in LA County, and that was done by supporting 11 nonprofit legal service providers, and in addition to supporting 5 organizations that provided additional capacity building work, which we'll share more about. Because of the support of the Justice Fund, we saw an increase in the number of attorneys doing this type of work in LA County, increased by 42 across these 11 providers. We saw 50 law students and attorneys who were trained in removal defense, as this is a very specialized area of law. And more importantly, saw the development of shared workspaces that could create greater access to legal counsel at detention centers like the Adelanto Detention Center out in San Bernardino. We want to talk a little bit about then who has Justice Fund been serving, and to that I'll turn it over to Rosie Arroyo.
Thank you, Efrain, and thank you. Since the Justice Fund was established, now the program was officially up and running in November of 2017. And so we are now at the tail end of the second year of this pilot program. And so since the program was established, at least based on the Vera evaluation, we know that 291 clients were served as of December 31st. But based on the latest data we have as of June 30, that number has increased to 420 clients. And many of the clients that the Justice Fund is serving have long-standing ties to the United States and have been in the country for an average of about 15 years. Clients are very diverse, they're young, they're vulnerable, and what we're seeing is that the fund is really supporting and attending the most vulnerable population and residents here in the city and county of Los Angeles. Some few additional stats is overall there's about 26 different nationalities that have been represented through the Justice Fund. 15 average years is the time that individuals have been in the U.S. 71% are under the age of 40 years, so very young population. 48% are parents to children living in the U.S. 92% have identified having a vulnerable class, whether being victims of domestic violence, human trafficking, or homelessness, among other vulnerabilities. 60% are male, about 35% are women, and 5% who identified as other than male or female. And, one of the things that we also want to do is we have seen that just the lawyering in a very complex and challenging environment, it has definitely just taken a lot, and there's a lot of creativity and effort from the attorneys that the Justice Fund is supporting, and which is why we invited one of our partners from Public Counsel to join us and also be able to talk about just when we look at the number 420 clients that have been served, what does that really mean and what does that look like? And so I would like to invite Talia with Public Counsel to share a little bit more about just the removal defense representation process and what that has entailed for attorneys in a very challenging and complex environment.
Sure, thanks, Rosie. I can give you just kind of an overview of sort of what this looks like from the ground level, and particularly speaking to those agencies that are involved in what we call the LA Justice Fund Detained Collaborative. There are 5 agencies that have devoted our funds to helping what we view as the most vulnerable in the immigration system right now, those on the brink of deportation, those being held at the Adelanto Detention Facility, which is the sole remaining detention facility in the Los Angeles area. To represent clients in that climate, in that environment now, requires a huge expenditure of time and resources. It begins with just getting to the detention facility, which is located an hour and a half to 2 hours east of Los Angeles, just getting ourselves out there. Often when we show up, we're met with roadblocks. There's a medical quarantine, and they won't allow us to see our clients despite scheduled appointments. We've scheduled an appointment. We need to wait an hour and a half to 2 hours still to be able to see our clients. Once we're able to actually visit with the client and make contact, we then need to go through a screening process, and that's in part because some of what we've talked about here, the residency and criminal carve-outs that have been put into place as a result of the program require significant screening time. So we're often not able to sign a client at that first meeting because we first need to make sure that they actually fit within the program parameters. So then we return to the office, we run our checks, we get the information that we need to ensure that we can actually represent the client, and then we take another trip back out. That's again another an hour and a half to 2 hours where hopefully we're able to see the client. During each proceeding, once we are able to represent, we've really made a commitment to try to represent the client holistically. So through full scope representation, that means representation at a bond hearing, at what are called master calendar hearings, which are preliminary hearings, of which there are often 2 to 3 in a given case, and then ultimately at their merits or individual hearings, which can be scheduled months out, and often those get continued as well. So you're talking about anywhere between, I would say in any case, at least a minimum of 3 and often upwards of 5 or 6 hearings just for one single client. And these hearings, again, are held in Adelanto, so each one requires a trip out and back. The cases are often complex. As you've heard, we're representing clients who have deep ties to the United States. Many of them have lived in our county, our city for a very long time. That means we're collecting information about their families, their communities. We're reaching out to their employers, their children, their schools are participating. Sometimes we need to get experts involved to talk about the impact that their deportation will have on their children. All of that, of course, takes tremendous time and resources, and we are, the stakes could not be higher at this moment, and so we are throwing all the resources we can into ensuring the best possible representation. If we are lucky, we're able to get our clients out, released on bond, and when that happens, they come back into the community, which is a wonderful thing, but their cases don't stop. They continue on, and so when you're looking at the numbers from the Vera report and the CAO report, and you're looking at the open case numbers, some of those clients remain detained, or either are on appeal or their cases are still waiting for a merits hearing in detention, but many of them have been released into the community, but are still at imminent risk of deportation and removal proceedings, and we're continuing. We've committed to representing those clients throughout their proceedings. Some of those cases will take years. Just one example from Councilmember Price's district, we have a client who was released at the end of last year. He's a father of 4 U.S. citizen children, works at a restaurant in the community, is a soccer coach for youth in the community, and he got involved in that as a response to his own experience as a young person in the community where he was gang involved and then extricated himself, and has been for 10 years a father and contributing member of the community. He's now in removal proceedings. We were able to get him out on bond last year, but his proceedings have continued, and his merits hearing, his final, what may be his final hearing or not, depending on how the case moves, is not until January of 2020. We have other clients, a gay HIV positive client who has who was released also on bond, has only a master hearing in June of 2020, which means his final hearing won't be set until at least 2021. So we're talking about sort of long-term commitments to our community members, and that's what it takes. That's what it takes in this day and age to really fight well and fight hard against the administration. So I'm happy to answer more questions later about the process, but hopefully that gives you some sense of what kind of resources these cases take.
So, and I just really wanted to make one point and thank Talia for sharing that, because something that has been very challenging to capture in the data is that the benefits that a lawyer brings is much more than just, the representation, but that there are benefits that really radiate throughout a family and an entire community. And these stories really demonstrate that the benefits that having access to due process, having access to an attorney brings stability to a family. And oftentimes we're seeing that the individuals that are being detained are the breadwinners of their home. And so I know we wanted to just briefly talk a little bit about the impact, but know that the impact extends far beyond just the numbers that we're seeing in this slide. And definitely see that through the infrastructure that the Justice Fund is supporting, providers have touched more than 1,000 individuals screening. So screening doesn't mean that they were just screened. It really means that they were also provided some legal guidance or just recommendation referral to other, sources that could, help them with their legal case. And we have seen that of the completed cases, 44% have had successful outcomes, allowing clients to remain in the U.S., compared to the success rate of unrepresented cases nationwide, which is less than 5%. So a very, very big increase here. And then also just overall, there has been a strong infrastructure with the capacity building organizations and the direct legal service providers really making investments to build and strengthen the local infrastructure, increasing, legal capacity and representation.
So you're saying that the 6 successful outcomes of the 14 cases completed is the basis for your 44% successful rate?
So we have to update some of that data. I think some of the data was is not accurate, but overall, what we do know of the Justice Fund cases that have been taken on, majority, close to 90% still are active cases. And so, but of those cases that have closed, 44% have had successful outcomes, and we will pull that data point right now to share exactly what that looks like.
So it may be
All of
more
us
than-
have read the reports, we're familiar with the numbers, so we want to get, when you give us a percentage, it either has no value or it only has value in the context of what those numbers are. So when you say 44%, it's of a certain set universe, right? It looks like that's the 6 cases out of the 14. Herman, today, please try to control yourself. I don't want to ask you to leave. I don't want to kick you out. So I want to ask you, don't be disruptive because you're being effective. And so please today, this is not the day for that. Thank you. Wayne, same to you. Thank you. Okay, continue.
Thank you, Councilmember. I want to say that yes, we stand by the 44%. It's taken from the completed cases that are documented in the evaluation and the reports. As it is dated, there's additional cases that may have closed since then, and so that in addition to that. So just wanted to make sure and allow time for questions. So you have information in front of you that also covers the funding that for the CAO reported the city's allocation, but in total, we've presented here the 7.4 million, how that was distributed across the 11 legal service providers, 5 capacity builders, and as our colleague Talia's mentioned, many cases are open because of the process and the length of it. So 87% of cases in LA Justice Fund remain open and active at some stage of the removal process. And the resources are being utilized. Over 70% have already been spent out, and the projection is that 90% will be spent out at the end of the term, with the exception of a couple of potential extensions that CAO also mentioned are in process of amendment. But in summary, I think looking ahead and going back to our initial comments, wanted to share that for California Community Foundation, and I think this is true for some of our other partners, we've seen that the investment was critical, that it's definitely having an impact. It's about the most vulnerable and not about the majorities, and that a safety net that protects this due process is critical, and that's why California Community Foundation and our colleagues from Weingart Foundation, who are also here today, have made a commitment to reinvest in the Justice Fund, to work with the city and county to think about how we can actually support this safety net more efficiently in a more robust way that actually allows our service providers to reach more, do more, be more effective than they already have been, and so have committed an additional $1 million for CCF, and I know Weingart has matched that, so a total of $2 million to continue the work. And we understand that for a lot of the folks being represented and hoping that they'll have some relief, that it was much more than a pilot to them and more about really being caught by a safety net, and we know that that takes long-term commitment, and we're ready to do that and excited to have the opportunity to do that, all of us together.
Before I open this up to my colleagues, so we've agreed the target is the most vulnerable. Give me the universe of that. Is it like 37,500, 39,000? I read in some report. What's the universe of the most vulnerable?
Actually defer to one of my colleagues. Are you in LA County? Mm-hmm. What we define as the most vulnerable? Yeah, I was going to say, I think the most concise target is those are most vulnerable at this very moment are those in detention, and we can give you a number of what that looks like in a given moment.
Yeah, so the detention center at Adelanto right now holds almost 2,000 people, and they are trying to expand that to 2,500. In our view, they are the most at risk because they're literally in the clutches of ICE. But in terms of how many, I don't have the broader number of LA County or city.
I mean, at CCF for our work around immigration, I mean, certainly just looking at LA County, I mean, you have close to 1 million undocumented immigrants and, 800,000 lawful permanent residents. And that is, as we see it, like very vulnerable populations that are also
We get
at
that,
risk.
but this project's designed to service a very specific population. I just want to know the universe of that population.
Yes, I think in current moment and where it's been the most effective has been in those that are detained, which are those in Adelanto. So that universe of those most vulnerable and in imminent threat is around 2,500.
What report did I read where it had 37,000 people? Maybe
I'm
they
not
had
sure what
orders
report.
of deportation or
Oh, total orders. I don't know that statistic, but I'm pretty sure it's larger than 2,000. Yeah, because there are folks with orders of deportation not detained, but they're active and out there.
Right.
So that is a much larger universe.
Colleagues.
Yeah, I have a series of questions. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So according to the CAO's report, 59% of the city's funds has been expanded since last quarter. Is that correct? So that's the $1.19 million that you spoke about? According to the quarterly report that was issued in March? Is that figure correct? Yes, I'm asking you. You dispersed them. No, I'm just basing it on the report that I read. So according to your report, only 59% of the funds had been expanded since last quarter. Is that correct? Which totals $1.19 million.
That's expenditures to date
Okay.
for the city.
And so what's the number today, and what's the total that the LA Justice Fund's balance today? Do you have that number?
So CCF collects quarterly data from all the organizations. We're in process of receiving data for the most recent quarter. What we do have is the data that we have here in the PowerPoint slide in terms of the dollars that have been allocated. The Vera evaluation that is as of December 31st has a breakdown of that, so we can pull those numbers and provide those to
You
also.
don't have those numbers now? Because what I have is the LA Justice Fund balance today is $425,000 as of March.
That is correct.
That is correct?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I think we want to be sure to get you the right number. Is all.
You should have the right numbers
Yep,
today.
we do have the right numbers. They're in classification. So the total funds, with the exception of the 425,000 that you referred to, were granted and dispersed to the legal service providers. The reports that we get is as they're represented in identifying cases, how much of the resources that they've been provided have they actually spent out, and how much of the resources are still available.
So
for them
I
to
get all that,
continue the
sir,
work.
but so you're here, this is the one item that we're listening to in this committee hearing. We should be prepared with real numbers in real time. The next question I have is, so last time we met, and we had discussed this issue in committee, you gave us an estimate of an average cost per case, which comes to, using our city funds, to $9,140, according to the report. And so that's pretty close to private market cost, which is almost $10,000. So that's the average cost of a case with a private attorney. So we're spending $9,000, $140 per case, but we've only completed 14 cases, of which only 6 were successful. So should we start to talk about reevaluating the process or the structure in place? I mean, because this number is incredibly high.
Yeah, so it's a great question, and what we, in working with our colleagues at Vera, it is too early in the program to understand the full cost per case, because the way the Justice Fund program was structured was dollars have also been invested to support the capacity
Sorry
building.
to cut you off. Are we approaching the 2-year mark?
Yes, but currently, because almost close to 90% of cases are still active and haven't closed, we will not be able to provide that data yet until as the case is closed, we will be able to gather more information on that data. And so we have been working very closely with our partners to look at other research and models that are out there. And unfortunately, it is an area in the field that just has not. There's not enough information yet, and because these programs are also very new, it's something that is just going to take time to gather some of the data. And as Efrain had mentioned, the LA Justice Fund funding model was not structured as a per case payment model. So the dollars were really that each organization received was really more providing funding support to hire the staff, the attorneys.
Yeah,
so there's a lot of other factors that.
The sense of urgency is that people are still in detention centers in inhumane conditions, sitting there in detention centers. So I understand that you need to staff up, but my sense of urgency is trying to get as many people out of those detention centers as soon as possible. That's why I voted for this. Can I get to my next question, if I may? Because
Yes.
I know we're limited on time. So of the 188 city-funded cases, 90%, which is almost like 169 of those cases, remain open. So what is the average amount of time that a case is open before it's internally deemed unsuccessful or closed? Maybe the attorney can answer that.
Yeah, I mean, it really depends on the case, as I explained. Okay. So if we bond somebody out, it's not because we think it's unsuccessful. That's a successful outcome, and I don't think those are counted in your 6 out of 14. I think those are talking about actually completed cases. So I don't think the bonds are included in that number. But if we bond somebody out, their cases.
Do you have that number of the amount of people you've bonded people out? That's important to know. And why wasn't it in the report?
Yes, I will pull that.
So that case is going to be open until the term of the final hearing, and as I said, that can take. It will almost certainly take at least a year from the time of release, and it often takes several years from the time of release from detention for that case to close. We're not keeping cases open to. We close them out when we're done with them.
So I really wanted to get to the particular difficulties you're encountering with these cases and what's prolonging us from completing a case, or what's prolonging the case from remaining open. That's one of the things I'd love to get to.
Yeah, so I think bond is part of that, which is a good thing, right? As I see, that's a good thing if the case is open, right? That means
I would love for most of our money to be spent in that way, to be honest with you.
Yeah, no, so
get people out of these detention centers as soon as possible.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're trying to get as many people out. So a lot of, at least in the Detained Collaborative, and I know some of the organizations funded are not detained, so I'm really speaking from that perspective.
Okay.
I think probably for non-detained, it's because the processes take a really long time. If you're applying for special immigrant juvenile status, or in some of our detained cases, we're applying for a U visa for victims of domestic violence or forms of trafficking. Those are taking years to complete, years and years to complete, and we're arguing to get people out, or we're trying to keep their removal proceedings open as long as possible to wait to try to get a decision on the U visa. Those cases are remaining open. We have really difficult judges in Adelanto. Sometimes we're losing often on grounds that we think are completely illegitimate, and as the law changes basically every other week with this administration, we're taking cases up on appeal, and we're seeing some wins on appeal too. We just got a win on a motion to reopen on a Justice Fund case, I think like 2 weeks ago, because we're keeping those legal arguments alive. So the open cases, those are not just sort of sitting. Those are cases where we're actively pursuing relief, or we're desperately fighting to keep the case alive long enough in removal proceedings so that we can obtain another form of relief. And I just want to say on the private attorney front, and I don't, I've only practiced in the public sector, so I don't have specific information or data, but I will say that because of some of the challenges I described about representing people in detention centers, very few private attorneys will take detained cases, because it is you need to spend so much time traveling, and I don't know if that $10,000 figure that you're quoting is for a
that's in the
detained
report.
case.
I'm not making it up. It was stated in the report, and that's where I got that's where I'm formulating my questions based on the report that I was given.
Okay, so I'm not sure whether that point of comparison
I'm
is
not an attorney.
from a detained or non-detained, but I will say, detained cases, because of the 2-hour drive, because of all the barriers to even getting to your clients, because the court is there as well and you're traveling for each court hearing, one of the reasons so few people in detention are represented isn't because there aren't a lot of private immigration attorneys in the LA area, it's because most of them can't afford themselves to take on those cases because of the amount of resources it takes to represent people in detention.
All right, thank you for that. I want to get back to the report. So according to the report, it also states that 1,314 individuals were screened by the LA Justice Fund. How did that amount turn into 375 cases that were that screened them out?
A large number not meeting the requirements that are set forth in the program. So one of our biggest takeaways at CCF and other partners is the program is structured in a way that it's weeding out a lot of people that could be helped effectively. So a lot of those is that, others are just not having something that could be pursued by the attorneys in a case. I don't know, Tala, since you all have screened a number of those folks, if you would add other categories of those.
Sure. I mean, sometimes we're doing upwards, if we have capacity to take on, 2 cases at a given moment, we're doing upwards of like 10 to 15 intakes sometimes to just get those 2. And part of that, a big part of that are the carve-outs, the residency and the criminal requirements that are taking time to screen and sort out. And then some piece of it, though lesser often, is the procedural posture of the case. So if we're meeting somebody, in detention cases can move very quickly, especially at the start. And so some of that is figuring out, are we able to jump into a case at the posture where it's in, or can we have more impact by taking a case earlier on? But really the largest number, I think, have been carved out by the residency requirement. And this was a big issue during the family separation crisis, which still continues in some form, right, is who can we represent given the program parameters and making sure we're adhering to those requirements.
The next question I had, according to the report, it outlines that 39 non-detained cases were dealing with children. Do we know how many of those were unaccompanied minors, and what kind of resources we're providing to ensure that their needs are being met?
So total children's cases, based on the latest data we have, is about 75 cases of the 420.
It's not 39. That's inaccurate.
That was so that's just based on the latest data that CCF has been collecting. So that data we have not. It's in the upcoming report that we will be submitting to City and County. So
how old are the numbers that are in the report then?
Yeah, the 75 children cases are part of unaccompanied minor cases.
Okay, and so do we know my second part of that question was, do we know how many of these children were unaccompanied minors and what kind of resources we're providing for them? Do we have that information?
So the Justice Fund is supporting organizations that are providing diverse, so for a few organizations that just are solely dedicated to representing unaccompanied minor children cases, so organizations like Kind and others have been taking those cases. So they are also providing the legal representation, legal services to these children. And so just like all other cases, they are provided with the full representation.
And Councilwoman, we can provide you a more detailed report because there is that is a great case study. We're coordinating with our county partners. They've been also able to leverage and coordinate social services around some of those wraparounds. And I think it'd be worth doing a pull-out and just giving you a more detailed.
You don't have that information today?
It's not included in,
so
no, in any of
out of the
reports.
75 children, are they still in detention centers? All 75 have we?
No, not all 75.
How many of the 75 have been released?
On that one, we don't have that data point with us today, but we can also provide that.
And Mr. Chair, I have one final question. So is the county supporting additional funding for this? How much are you looking at, and are they making any changes in the existing structure?
Is that to me?
Whomever has the answer.
Well, can you restate the question?
So is the county supporting are they going to provide us additional funding for this program? What to what amount, and are they looking at restructuring this process?
So to your first question, we are continuing to work with our county partners as they consider it. They have not made a final decision as to.
They haven't made any financial commitment.
They haven't made any financial commitment for additional years of funding. CCF, Weingart have made those commitments and are actively working and are here today to actively seek additional support. As to the question about restructuring, even the year one Vera evaluation and work with our legal service provider partners have uplifted there are inefficiencies in the program. So I think that any moving forward should restructure. What those specific restructuring recommendations are, we want to get to those and work on those, and we believe that it should be done as initially in collaboration with our city partners, the county, and our additional stakeholders to figure out what is the best way to support this. I think at this time we feel that as currently structured, our funds are not being used as efficiently as they could to help as many people as possible that are in detention.
Thank you very much for your honest answer. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Price, Senator.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks for the report. CLA, I think you began, and you made some comment about extending the time, and I didn't get the full impact of that. Could you kind of revisit that paragraph for me again? What time are we extending? And
For another year so that we could disperse our final payment.
so the city is extending the time so that it can
Correct.
make those payments. That's what you referred to. Okay.
I just wanted to just add a clarifying point on the payment. So CCF, we do have one pending payment from the city, but CCF has front-loaded those resources to provide ongoing support in the meantime to, we replenish the fund. But just wanted to share because of the organizations already on track to spend down, most of them are going to be spending on their budget. So I know that just wanted to provide that additional point.
Okay, thank you. The reports indicate that some organizations have taken more cases than others, right? Do we know why? How that occurs? Why some organizations seem to be more?
Well, we have seen, so on average, organizations have been able to maintain a caseload of about 26 cases per organizations, give or take. The variance is really just the first 6 months to 8 months of the Justice Fund was really the ramp-up phase. So it was really a matter of when organizations were able to fully staff and operationalize the program. And one of the challenges organizations came across at the beginning is being able to identify, qualifying attorneys that have the removal defense expertise and background. So that is why with the philanthropic resources, we saw the need that we also need to continue to build and strengthen the pipeline of attorneys that go into removal defense work. But overall, that was one of the reasons that organizations we're not all staffed up at the same time, so it varies per organization.
Are they all staffed up now to
Yes.
some adequate level?
Yes.
So have organizations committed to doing a certain number of cases, or are they just sort of staffing up saying that we'll do what comes through?
So,
Anybody?
yeah. So that's a great question because yes, there is an expectation around that. So in the grant agreements with legal service providers, there were agreements and threshold sets around, on average with these funds, this is about how many cases we'll be able to take. That's how our initial estimates of about 500 to 700 cases was the ideal for the pilot. So that is written into the agreement.
Each organization has a certain number, or they all have the same number?
No, they all provide a certain number, and that's why they all receive different levels of funding. Everyone didn't receive one standard level of funding. Each organization, based on what they could do, received an appropriate allocation of grant dollars.
And what's that number? Just depends on the organization, you're saying?
It depends.
They decide how many they can do.
It depends on the organization. There were some that went up to 500,000, some that are receiving a lot less than that, again, based on a capacity of how many cases of this nature they would take on.
I think some of the differences probably are also the nature of the cases. As you heard, some people are doing non-detained, unaccompanied children's work. Some people are doing detained cases. They just require different resources, and you can only take so many at a time. If you're working on a detained case that's going to stay detained, that person's probably going to go to trial within 3 to 5 months of when you take on the case, whereas a non-detained case, you're looking at 3 to 5 years. So I think it's just a different kind of risk analysis. I'll also say on the staffing point, though, and this is where I think the urgency really comes in that maybe we haven't focused enough on yet in our comments, is that our staff are on the brink of leaving because there is no commitment. There is zero commitment, so far from the city. And as you've heard, the county has not actually put forward any dollars. Our attorneys need to work. We've now trained them. We've invested. A big part of this investment in the initial 2 years was building this infrastructure, building our staff, and they have a lot of other options now because they're very highly trained, and this work is needed all here, but it's also needed all over the country. And we are going to, or we already have, lost people because of this level of uncertainty. So we are really kind of on the brink of losing so much of what we've built because of this uncertainty. So I just want to underscore, at least from the service provider perspective, the urgency of having a commitment for these dollars.
You identify about 26 different nationalities, and we appreciate that diversity. I'm kind of curious about kind of what that breakdown looks like. I know the focus has been on the Latino diaspora, but I referred several cases from Haiti, for example. I know there have been some from the islands, from Africa. Can you give us some sense of where these 26 different nationalities, what they represent, what parts of the world they represent?
Yep, we're pulling that out from the report. I know we do break down the different countries of origin.
All right. That's all I have, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Yes, and it's very diverse, and definitely, there are a significant the top 5 countries that clients have been representing, from Mexico, Guatemala, El Salvador, are some of the top countries that are being represented. Honduras and Cambodia is also the 5th largest country that the Justice Fund is representing.
Aside from Cambodia, any other Latino?
We have a client from Botswana.
Okay. Anybody from Haiti?
Yes, we have clients that have also, there's what we have received as there has been an increase in, individuals at the detention center from Haiti as well.
Okay.
Let me ask you to get to the committee the number of bond hearings, the success, how many people are out on bond. Again, I'm not comfortable or clear on what the universe is with respect to who we are trying to service. This is for the 2 attorneys. Give us, how would you scale up? How would you create a greater efficiency so that the numbers are not, as they appear, as anemic as they appear?
Yeah, I mean, I think in this pilot phase, the money was allocated in such a way that no organization could really scale up efficiently. The most, I'm surprised to hear you give that $500,000 number. I think it was closer to I thought it was closer to $300,000 that each agency could get for each year, and so that would allow at maximum, 2 attorneys and one staff assistant, administrative assistant. That's, you can't really scale up efficiently with that kind of staffing. So I think, as a pilot phase to kind of look at who the players in the field are, since this is a first-time program for the city and county, maybe that made sense. But I think in a future round, narrowing the number of organizations doing the work and allowing them to actually go up to scale, to hire, to get those efficiencies. That way you can have staff members covering one another's hearings, right? You don't have to send as many people out for a master hearing. Another attorney who's already there that day for their hearing can cover it. You'll get some of those efficiencies. You'll start to build some of that institutional knowledge. You won't need to spread. There are really intensive reporting requirements, extremely intensive. I think a lot of that came from the county, but which took up a lot of staff time, and that's being multiplied by 11, right? If you have 11 different service providers, then all 11 are having to train their staff, have their staff report. So I think narrowing the number of organizations, and I think also as you're suggesting, I think we need to collectively really come up for a vision. Even if we had, $100 million, are we really, the need is so great right now. And so I think really having a vision for who do we want this fund to serve, and how can we best and allocate our resources. And of course, you've already heard my view, and I think when we advocated for this fund, many of us, trying to scale up to a universal representation model for those in detention who are at the most immediate risk is our vision, certainly, and a way to really ensure that the money is kind of being used most efficiently. But if the money is going to any immigrant anywhere in the city, and you only have $2 million or $3 million, obviously you're not going to be able to scale up to that kind of to those efficiencies.
But you had $8 million, so if you had $100 million, you would only have 5,000 cases.
Yeah. Well, as you've heard, as you've heard also, not all of the money was allocated directly to legal service providers. There were a lot of other, that $8 million did not all go to direct legal services. It also went to capacity building and other, and reporting and other allocations. So it's not $8 million divided by 420 or whatever many cases there are now. It's more like 5 million. I don't know if you all can give the numbers better, huh? So 5 million divided by 420. So
it's 8,000 cases.
It's about.
If you had $100 million with your numbers.
I went to law school, non-medical school, so my math is not, I can't do the math in my head, but I trust that what you're saying is correct.
Thank you.
So I think one thing that
Counselor?
hasn't been mentioned that I think is really important, so as Vera, we have played the role of the researcher and the evaluator. And a lot of these questions that we're asking and the answers are really dependent on our ability to continue to collect this data through case completion. So some of the reasons why we keep sort of putting asterisk on these numbers is precisely because we have such a high number of open cases. We cannot conclude or put price tags really specifically on a lot of these activities until we have completed information. And unfortunately, due to the current legal landscape and the complexity of the cases that a lot of these attorneys are dealing with, these cases are taking much longer than any one of us would want. So that's from the Vera perspective of the importance. I think this initiative is, could set a precedent, and we are also very much interested in continuing to remain a research partner so that we can come up with, how do these programs really operate, what kind of models, and to answer that kind of question of how could we accurately and effectively scale up in an evidence-based way. So that's from Vera's side. We really do want to echo everything else that's been said, but truly the importance of continuing to collect this information.
Thank you. So we'll need an update on the status of the 75 unaccompanied minors.
Regarding their detention status, so all of them are released, none of them are detained.
Okay.
I just asked that question and you didn't have the answer.
She has it. Take the yes. So all of them are released. Okay.
But I think, Mr. Chair, I think what we promised was to give a more detailed of what were the statuses, what happened, and how did that go, even if they are released on what it's going. I think we would definitely.
I was very specific. I asked if the 75 children were still being detained.
Yeah, I think the team
You
was
didn't have
actually
the answer.
confirming and checking.
I just
got it.
confirmed the
Okay.
information.
We didn't say
before.
that, but I did ask the question.
Yeah.
Taking the answers in real time. So talk to me, there were 9 cases with a criminal waiver. I'm interested in the status. What happened to those cases? Were they part of the 14 cases that were completed? Were they part of the 6 successful outcomes? I'm interested in those with the criminal status. What does that do to their potential to have a successful outcome?
To the latter part of your question, I would invite, you guys haven't used the waiter. We can get you that information. We don't have the specifics on those 9, and as a non-attorney, wouldn't know what it does to their potential for their case to be winnable or not.
To the attorneys, if you have, so there's limits on the service population. What's the impact if on their probability of the outcome if they have these criminal backgrounds?
It really depends what the criminal conviction is and what the context is. So we got released last week on bond a DACA youth, 21 years old, who has a battery, like a first misdemeanor battery offense. We were able to get him out on bond. I think he's got a U.S. citizen fiance. He's lived here basically his entire life. I think the likelihood that he'll be able to get relief, I hope, is very good. And again, the law is complex. It's constantly changing. For a lawful permanent resident, criminal convictions may serve as a discretionary issue, but often are not statutory bars to a form of relief called cancellation of removal. And so it really depends on the nature of the conviction and the whole picture. I mean, our goal is legal service providers. We're also, we're defense attorneys, and we're looking at the person as a whole and not just at their conviction.
Anything else? So you're going to find us the 9 cases that went forward with the criminal history waivers.
Yeah, we can provide you an update on those.
One second, please. Mr. Chavez. So where are we now?
I think you just did that. I don't know. Listen.
Okay, thank you. Please don't go away. We're going to have public comment, and then we'll proceed from there. Okay, public comment. Let's start with Herman. Is Antonia here?
Mr. Chair?
Corey Schmidt. Vine Nguyen.
Mr. Chair, is this a minute or 2 minutes? Is this just a general public comment or?
So let's have comment on item 1 only, 1 minute. Item 1.
Dollar data. Fucking bitch can't come up with the 44%. What kind of cocksuck is this? 4,225 G's? US 395, 444, 1969, Brandenburg versus Ohio. Sounds like this item number 1. 19 STRO 06853 for the record. Treason. Such treason to bring 7.9 a legal defense to support illegal fucking immigrants. This fucking country is really going to hell. When do you plan to stop the stealing? Not one fucking asshole in this committee has the answer but to lie. If they ever make me carry a fucking rifle, the first illegal I want to get in my sights. Donald Trump, fuck them, fuck DACA, and bring ICE and fuck them all.
Antonia Ramirez. Corey Schmidt. Antonia Ramirez is not here. Corey Schmidt. Vi Nguyen, Carolina Guman.
Corey Schmidt for the record. Okay, so here's what I hear is Weingarts are matching California Community Foundation for $4 million, and we're considering about 8, so we got about 12. And I want to know, so okay, those are the numbers, but like, I want to know what are we considering for the budget here? Are we talking, like, how much are we talking hourly for the attorneys? You know, because I mean, usually attorneys ask for a lot. So I did some basic numbers based on what I estimated to be what would be asking. Reasonable, or, you know, some people would snuff at it, but I'm guessing about 28 to 56 like attorneys at 40 hours a week, and that would be like a yearly salary covered. So I see that we're talking about cases, and I'm not hearing like the work with the case, or I mean the workload.
Thank you. Ms. Nguyen, Vi Nguyen. No, we're joined on this subject that we've just heard. Vi Nguyen, Carolina Guman, Wayne.
Good afternoon, council members. My name is Vi Nguyen, and I'm with the Weingart Foundation, a private foundation that funds throughout Southern California to advance racial, social, and economic justice. The Weingart Foundation has been a funding partner with the LA Justice Fund since its inception. I want to thank the City Council for supporting the creation of the fund, which is a groundbreaking public-private partnership. I'm pleased to share that this past September, our board renewed our support to the Justice Fund, approving an additional $1 million over 2 years. The Foundation Board did so based on the promising progress of the first 2 pilot years, during which time the Justice Fund has built up a solid foundation and infrastructure. We believe the fund is now poised to realize greater impact and efficiencies. In making its funding decision, our board affirmed that it is critical to continue to support Los Angeles' deportation defense infrastructure and safety net. As funding partners, we have built this infrastructure. Now we have a responsibility to sustain it. Lives hang in the balance. We believe...
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, council member.
Carolina Guman.
Good afternoon. I'm Carolina Goodman from the League of Women Voters of Los Angeles. Quoting from the National League website, the League of Women Voters has a long history of encouraging immigrants to participate in American society. Immigrants have helped weave the fabric and identity of our nation. Our democracy is enhanced by a diversity of voices, and the League believes that provisions for unauthorized immigrants already living in the United States to earn legal status will strengthen our nation and our society. I'm here to call on LA City to reaffirm its support for the LA Justice Fund and the millions of immigrants who call Los Angeles their home. In Los Angeles County, approximately 70% of detained individuals lack legal counsel. We must ensure due process for all. The LA Justice Fund was utilized to make significant investment in infrastructure in order to achieve efficiency for the long term.
Thank you.
Please continue. Thank you.
Wayne.
Too bad. You could have had me up there. I could have told you all them fucking answers. Too bad, you know. Well, you gave away the money. They stole it. Let's give them a hand. No, nobody does private practice fucking $10,000 a case unless they can do easily half that shit, you know. Bunch of them, you can do 3,500. These cases go on 10, 15. I just finished one in Arizona that went on for 24 years. That's how long that shit takes. And you know, when they got a criminal record, you got 42B, 42A, 601, 212C. I say, that's my shit. What a shame that you motherfuckers can't ask me to go up there and tell you about this. So I say, just keep giving them all the money, and you'll find out later what I know, that Nuri's a stupid cunt. Thank you.
Mariana Magana, Rob Kwan, and Talia Inlander.
Hi, committee members. My name is Mariana Magana, and I'm here with the Coalition for Humane Immigrant Rights, also known as CHIRLA. Once again, to urge this committee to renew its commitment to the immigrant community and to invest in public funding for the Justice Fund. Our immigrant community cannot wait. Unfortunately, our folks in detention cannot wait, and any delay further keeps our folks incarcerated in cages. In 2017, this fund was launched in response to a crisis, and a crisis that is still happening on a day-to-day basis and only seems to get worse. Immigrants are the backbone of our community. They're the backbone of the City of Los Angeles, contribute both socially and economically, and it is a responsibility for the City of Los Angeles to further protect our community from the attacks that come from the federal level on a day-to-day basis. Again, we urge the recommitment on behalf of the city to our community from public funded dollars to continue protecting the most vulnerable. Thank you.
Thank you. Rob Kwan, Talia Inlander, Rabea Sen.
Afternoon. I actually had something nice written originally, but in light of all that, I just want to note, we told you so. 2 years ago, we said that having carve-outs, having an extensive residency requirement would make this program less efficient. We would be able to serve fewer people. Do your staff fill out timesheets? No, because they work 24/7, just like these people. I'm really surprised by the whole posture of this committee. I haven't seen a fraction of this level of scrutiny for LAPD, where we've seen hundreds of millions in unaccounted for overtime. Single drop payment could cover this. Mitchell Englander, if he didn't retire early, $2 million, that could cover this. Do we not have an appreciation for how long cases take? What our justice system is like, who we're serving, the people in the process. It's not just about the outcomes and the immediacy.
Talia Inlander, Rabea Sen, Gabriel Arellano, Maria Melo.
Good afternoon. I'm Rabia Sen with Esperanza Community Housing, and we are here, as we were 2 years ago, to affirm our support for our partners in this movement to protect our immigrant communities, and to urge you to also renew your commitment to fully fund and renew the LA Justice Fund. There is no time. This crisis was bad back in 2017. The deportation machine was already attacking our communities at that time, and over these following 2 years, all we've seen is a deepening of this crisis. We work with the immigrant communities in South Central, and we're seeing the impact. As a DV advocate, I am seeing the impact on the survivors we work with. This is your opportunity to help us build upon the infrastructure that our immigrant rights attorneys have built, to build upon that infrastructure to increase our impact and our effectiveness. All I can say is please listen to the people who are actually doing this work. There is no time to waste. Our families, our neighborhoods, our communities are being torn apart.
Talia Inlander, please.
And there is
Thank
no
you.
option other than to
Gabriel Arellano, Gabriel Arellano, Maria Melo, Tess Feldman.
My name is Maria Mello. I work with the Los Angeles LGBT Center. The City of Los Angeles must reaffirm its commitment to protect hundreds of LGBT immigrant Angelinos that are part of our city's social fabric by renewing the Los Angeles Justice Fund. The Center is proud to advocate for LGBT immigrants and provide legal services to LGBT asylum seekers thanks to the Los Angeles Justice Fund. This is not the only range of services we provide to LGBT asylum seekers. Through our own general funds, we are able to offer LGBT primary care, HIV care, mental health support, housing, among many other services. To us, the Los Angeles Justice Fund has not only been a partnership between the city, county, and philanthropy, but a partnership with Los Angeles community service nonprofits to address what is one of the biggest challenges of our time. Make no mistakes. Make no mistake, immigrants are under attack in this country, and the city and immigration is an LGBT issue. Today's LGBT organizations in Los Angeles, California, and beyond are gravely concerned about the danger faced by LGBT asylum seekers here in our city and in detention centers. We urge your support and continue to advocate for this fund. Thank you.
Thank you. Gabriel Arellano, Tess Feldman, Alejandro Morales, Robert Gamboa.
Good afternoon. My name is Gabriel Arellano with Esperanza Immigrant Rights Project. I'd like to first mention I can speak to my own experience. I've been working out of the Adelanto Detention Center now for 5 years. It's the only job I've had outside of law school. When I started under the Obama administration, Adelanto was still there. It'll continue to be there into the foreseeable future. This is the first time, and at the time it's most needed, that we have this LA Justice Fund. I've spoken to people at the detention center before and only been able to provide them with legal information and do nothing else. We, as an organization, and the others here before you, this is the first time we've been ever able to do something about the people we encounter. And again, this is at the time it's most needed. This would be the worst time to make a decision not to recommit to this fund. Thank you.
Thank you. Tess Feldman, Alejandro Morales.
Good afternoon. My name is Tess Feldman. I'm an immigration attorney and manager of the Immigration Law Project of the Los Angeles LGBT Center, and I am one of the direct service providers that represents clients with the LAJF funding. I want to state first that it has been an honor to serve my clients and serve and represent each and every single person that this funding has allowed me to reach, work with, and access, because each of these cases represent people who would not have had funding without this generous support from the LAJF. And on that basis, I want to encourage that this funding be extended. And I want to make 2 points. In September, the immigration court backlog reached an all-time high of 1 million cases. So while we want to complete these cases in complete representation as soon as we possibly can, the system itself is not allowing that. And I also want to state that we're representing clients from Ethiopia, Zambia, Uganda, Syria, and Bangladesh, in addition to the Northern Triangle countries and Mexico. And this funding absolutely must be extended because the LGBT clients that we represent at the center are the most marginalized of the most marginalized immigrant population. And we thank you for your support and ask for it to continue. Thank you.
Thank you. Robert Gamboa.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Alexandra Morales, and I'm here in representation of CARECEN, the Central American Research Center, the largest Central American nonprofit in the United States. In regards to the Los Angeles Justice Fund, we cannot be more clear in saying that, yes, there will be a gap in funding between what remains in the fund and the start of the next budget cycle. So, no, unfortunately, we cannot wait until the next budget cycle to begin to ensure that there is representation and due process guaranteed for our community. And we need your support to ensure that that happens before the end of the year. You are the leaders in the front line who can ensure that our immigrant community can rely on this great city to not only be a city that stands with immigrants, but one that proudly defends our immigrant community. I do want to point out that the $2 million that the city contributed to the Justice Fund is only 0.01% of the general fund, and unfortunately, our immigrant communities have contributed $3.2 billion to the city of Los Angeles through the local taxes, and unfortunately, many of them will never see it back, and this is the way we need to pay back our immigrant community. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Robert Gamboa with the Los Angeles LGBT Center, and I'm a senior policy advocate. Immigration is an LGBTQ issue. The Importance of this funding to the LA Justice Fund cannot be underscored. The purpose of this fund is to strengthen and expand access to legal representation to Los Angeles immigrants facing deportation who are otherwise unable to afford or access legal services. There are thousands of LGBTQ immigrants who come here seeking refuge. We are a sanctuary city, and we are a world beacon of hope and acceptance. So many make the dangerous trek to come here for safety. And the work we are able to do with this fund not only helps immigrants with their cases, but it also has benefits beyond what we even imagine. For example, our work alone has helped immigrants with their work eligibility so that they can become taxpayers and earn their keep and live here, which also helps to prevent homelessness and poverty, which, as you know, is a very terrible situation here in LA. So it would be irresponsible to reduce or eliminate this fund and LA's contribution to it, as we still have so much work to do. Thank you.
Thank you. Andres Kwan, Lindsay, Chelsea Bell. Are you Chelsea or Lindsay?
Chelsea. Good afternoon, my name is
Lindsay,
Chelsea.
you're up next. Or Andres, you're up next.
Good afternoon, my name is Chelsea Bell and I'm a removal defense attorney with the Immigrant Defenders Law Center. My position is entirely funded by LAJF and my caseload is entirely LAJF. I'd like to share a story with you about one of my clients to demonstrate the broad impact an immigration case has on a family, on their community, and in turn on the county of Los Angeles. I have a client who's lived in the Los Angeles County since 2002. He has a U.S. citizen wife, 4 U.S. citizen children, all of whom were students in LAUSD. He was the sole financial provider for his family. His wife, his partner stayed home and cared for their young children. Less than a month after he was detained, his wife and their children were evicted from their two-bedroom apartment. Their car was repossessed, and they're now living on the living room floor of his parents' apartment. DCFS has become involved because the kids can't stay awake during school because they sleep on the floor. They're trying to take their kids away. I was able to connect them with certain service providers here in LA County, and I think without LAJF funding, their kids would have certainly been taken away from them. The family would not have access to certain services, and my client would definitely have been deported. Thank you.
Thank you. Andres?
Oh, sorry, we're going a little bit out of order. I'm Lindsay Tozlowski, Executive Director of Immigrant Defenders Law Center, and I wanted to speak after my attorney, Chelsea Bell, because I wanted to show the committee what we could lose. It's folks like her, it's the attorneys who have spent 2 years growing their skills, learning to be the advocates that are doing the important work, that are changing families, that are changing outcomes for people all across the city. When we have uncertainty and we have a situation where we may have to tell our attorneys that we can't continue to fund their salaries, they start looking in other places. So this city could lose the investment we've made in this program. Additionally, Immigrant Defenders Law Center opened the community space up near the Adelanto Detention Facility. We rehabbed a space. We used the investment from the city to create a place where we could be efficient, and all of the organizations that are represented here today are using that space. Our lease will be up soon, and without guaranteed funding, we won't be able to continue to use that. And by design, these cases are expensive. That's a function of the federal government placing people 90 miles away, and we want to continue to serve all of them. So please renew this funding. Thank you.
Andres Kwan, ACLU. Together we've been fighting this administration's white supremacist war on immigrants of color, which has relied more than ever on criminalizing immigrants and people of color. As Councilmember Rue may remember, he's not here today, this issue has been personal. I shared with him 2 years ago how myself, I've been criminalized with a felony for marijuana possession 14 years ago, but how I had a second chance and became a lawyer here in California. Yet right after I shared my story as a Korean American, Mr. Rue decided to call for a blanket exclusion of anyone with a felony record from being able to access the Justice Fund. But thanks to your leadership, Councilmember Cedillo and others, we're able to craft a compromise, which has saved lives. And we did something historic by creating the Justice Fund. Today, we must renew the program, because back then, the prospect of Trump's immigration agenda was terrifying. Now we know it was even worse than we could have ever imagined, including plans of mass violence. We urge you not only to continue the Justice Fund and double down on this urgent, crucial battlefront, but also to ensure due process for all.
Ready? That concludes public comment on this item. I thank all of you. I want to be very clear. We're going to keep this item going forward, but I want to be very clear as we instruct the CLA that we are committed to funding the fund. That is without question. The need for certainty is very evident, and the case is well stated. There's no question that we must move forward with this fund and its funding. That is not the differences or concerns that we have on this panel. Our concerns is how to maximize the efficiencies and the effectiveness. We share the concerns of everyone in the immigrant rights movement, all those concerned for social justice. These are the final days of the Trump era, but they are very dangerous days, and we share your concerns. And it's because of our duty and our obligations and our commitment to the immigration community to the immigrant community that we insist that we have the highest standards of performance and efficiency and effectiveness. As for those children who have been detained that shouldn't have been, the concerns that were raised by my colleague, we are duty bound to ask these questions, but again, it's only because of our shared commitment to the immigrant community and also to our duty and obligation around the expenditures. This is not the only arena in which we exercise our responsibilities and duties. You guys will probably have to present and represent your case before the Budget Committee, and that will not be any easier, but our recommendation will be to go forward with the funding. At the same time, there are other matters that have come before us. I know in your Energy and Efficiency Committee, Madam Chair, that you have also raised the same type of scrutiny and standards for the conduct of the city attorney with respect to funding and contracts and the vetting of contracts. This is our duty and our obligation, and we will continue to move forward with that. Our proposal is to have the CLA report back, the CLA to report with options to how we continue to fund the Justice Fund and working with the partners here to figure out how we become more efficient and more effective, both in reporting and, more importantly, in servicing the immigrant community. Any objections? Yeah, we're going to continue the item, but with that commitment and that understanding.
Thank you for your commitment, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chair, for clarification, do you want the recommendation that you get a report back from the CLA to go to the council when the Budget Committee takes it up, or
no,
hold everything in committee?
It's to come back here, okay? But we want to be very clear that it's to figure out how we fulfill our commitment. We are committed to funding the Justice Fund to go forward to move. I think we're behind in payments or expenditures to the fund. If that's the case, to move those funds forward, and then to talk to us about how we can move forward working with our partners more effectively and more efficiently. Is that clear?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
So you're asking for a report back. I'm just going to ask if we can also look at other models and what other cities are doing in terms of dispersing their funds for a justice fund model, whether other cities have a similar model, how it's working, how we can restructure it to be more efficient. I also would like to look at a model. Mr. Price, I don't want to put you on the spot, but I believe you have a model working in your district in which you contract with a nonprofit who specifically works on this issue, correct? Yes, correct. I don't know if you have any, I don't know if you have any data to show the results, but if that's a model that could work best for us, I'd like to explore that as well.
Absolutely.
If there is a nonprofit out there that does this and does it faster, I'd like to look at that model as well.
Yes, we'll look at that as well.
Right, that's included in the, well, that's a great clarification. I think Chairless here, I think Edison's here. Also, there should be thought given to whether or not we simply block fund these guys, that we create block grants so that people are then given given their dollars, the narrowing of the pool. I mean, we have some experience here for us to build upon, and so we should move forward to make sure that we do build upon this experience so that we can move forward more efficiently and more effectively. Good? Clear? Everybody understand? Okay. All right, so be the order. No objection? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your commitment.
That clears the calendar. That clears the calendar. We have public comment left, and we are waiting for public comment. Wayne and Herman and Corey, please join us. Go ahead, Wayne, start.
My mommy, she left Nuri. Mommy! Mommy! You see, my mommy, she left. I want to talk to my mommy, Nuri Wartwinas. And it was very, very sad to see that. I thought she was a lawyer. I thought she went to Kunz Queen College and passed the bar, but I can see that I was wrong. But she is a very good quality pimp, and she's done a lot to improve prostitution and proper drug sales on the 6th District, so we appreciate that. So now, nobody wants to hear from us. That's okay. But remember that Nuri Martinez is the one who authorized the goddamn lawsuit of Price Cooper's Waterhouse. And she knew everything. And we're going to blame Nuri Martinez for the whole DWP fiasco. A 20-year prison sentence. And finally, Gil Cedillo will survive this. Thank you so much.
Herman. I don't see Antonio Ramirez. Corey Smith, you want to come up, Corey?
So $7.9 million, and we have a homeless crisis dealing with Los Angeles' first fucking black president on immigration. No less troubling is this retaliation. Speaking about the cunts that come from Mexico illegally into our country, unconstitutionally breaking the United States agreement of treason. Fucking treason. Countrymen, hear me out. Immigration affairs can't do anything fucking right. Can't calculate, can't presume any fucking motion right. You heard it all today, filed by case number 19STRO06853, Hugo Steven Rossiter. You're a lying motherfucker, and all your fucking bullshit in the courts of the Moss Stanley on behalf of Donald Trump, fuck you!
Corey Schmidt. So we're talking about the success rate, which is kind of shit. I just think we should be considering an hourly thing, talking about the actual team that we got going rather than the cases and everything. So, and that thing that I calculated did include bonding out. So I think there should be a stipend set aside, not just kind of haphazardly. Yeah, I just didn't see a thorough plan that I made me say yes to this. But I do think ultimately we're facing a population problem. So, I just don't want to contribute to homelessness. I'm not against immigration, but I just want to make sure that we're spending money appropriately. And, parents, I'm cool with. People that need help, I'm cool with. I don't want to increase the homeless issue. I don't want people taking advantage of us.
Thank you. I believe that concludes all items on the agenda. Is that correct? Yes. Okay. Motion to adjourn in order? No objection. So be the order. Thank you for your attendance. That concludes the hearing today of the Immigrant and Human Rights and Civil Rights committee. Thank you.